When I think of NES third-party companies, I automatically think of two of the major players in the game, those being Capcom and Konami. Now you might remember a few weeks ago I actually did my 5 best Capcom NES titles, and over on the Patreon page, Alan, who came up with that video idea, said, hey, why don't you follow it up with Konami video? And I was like, hey, that's a really good idea. So in this video, I want to talk about Konami and the NES because there were so many awesome Konami games on the NES that they actually had to make a secondary company. You see, Nintendo only allowed third-party publishers to release a certain number of games, and Konami said, hey, we have a lot of these games on the Famicom, we want to bring them stateside. So they actually made a secondary company called Ultra, but in this video, I just want to focus on Konami published titles that are made just by Konami and not Ultra Games. So in this video, we're going to talk about the 5 best Konami games on the NES, in my opinion, of course. So sit back, relax, let's take a trip down memory lane, and let's talk about some Konami titles on the NES.
Hey, RGT 85. Hey, Sean.
Oh my God, it's Stevie Richards! The first game I'm going to talk about published by Konami on the NES is a game that begins with B, and it also had a TV show and it had a bunch of other merchandise and whatnot, and I know what you guys are thinking. Oh, he's going to say Bucky O'Hare. But actually, I'm not. If this was a top 6 video, I would include Bucky O'Hare, but I'm going with a different B game, and it may cause a little bit of controversy, but Batman Returns on the NES from Konami was an amazing game. Everyone talks about the original Batman game that released on the NES, and I do love that game. I think it's really good, but I like this game a little bit more because it actually follows the areas of the movie. Batman on the NES just sort of felt like it was a random platformer with Batman thrown in it, and he played more like a ninja than he actually did Batman. Batman Returns, though, is a more side-scrolling classic beat-em-up, and it's a really fun, underrated game. This was published by Konami. It follows the events of the Batman Returns movie very faithfully. You'll recognize areas from the game, you'll recognize areas from the movie, and it's just a really well-done game. I really enjoy this game. Not enough people give this game credit, but Batman Returns is an excellent game from Konami on the NES, and definitely one of my 5 favorites on the system. You guys ready for another controversial pick? I know you guys are. I'm going with a sports game. A sports game? Am I out of my mind? No, come on. If you're an NES fan and an NES owner, you own multiple copies of this game. You have played this game to death. You have played this game so many times that it is burned in your mind as one of the greatest sports titles of all time. And that is Blades of Steel. I love this game to death. It is fast-paced action hockey, and it's just so fluid and so much fun. If you get together with a buddy and play in 2-player mode, you could play this game for hours and hours and hours. It's definitely not a realistic style game. It's more of that arcadey style of gameplay, but I like that in my sports games. It actually makes it fun. It makes a good deviation. I'm not the biggest hockey fan in the world, so I don't care about actual players and actual stats and whatnot. I want to just check people, fight people, and score some goals, and Blades of Steel is an excellent game. It still holds up today, in my opinion, as an excellent hockey game, and is one of my favorite sports titles on the NES, and it's on this list because Konami published it. So Konami's Blades of Steel on the NES, a definite must-own game. It's super cheap anyways, and one of their best games on the platform. What's a Konami list if you're not talking about one of the greatest games of all time? One of the games that set the standard for how 2D side-scrolling action games should be done, how the control should be done, what the gameplay should be like. Freaking Contra, man. Contra is just a timeless game once again. It's just such a perfect blend of action-based gameplay with, you know, that Rambo style. We always got these crappy Rambo games. This is really Rambo, okay? If you want Rambo in a video game, if you just want to blow through people and just shoot, shoot, shoot and get laser power-ups and do all sorts of fun stuff, Contra is the game for you. It's such a fun game, and it's just a timeless classic. They followed this up with Super C and, of course, Contra Force, which is a bit of a controversial game. Super C is a solid game in my opinion, but the original Contra just holds a place in my heart as one of the best Konami games, and honestly one of the best NES games of all time. The fact that you could play with 2 players at once just makes this game so much fun. Definitely a game you need to check out if you for some reason never checked it out, but Contra is definitely a top tier game and one of the 5 best from Konami on the NES. I thought this next pick was going to be a little bit more difficult because there were 3 Ninja Turtle games released on the NES. And although the first one wasn't that great, I actually liked the second one. I thought the second one was pretty good. And then of course we have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, The Manhattan Project. So I was kind of going back and forth. I was like, well, which one should I put on the list? But then I realized something. The first 2 were done by Ultra Games, which we talked about in the intro. So it made it super easy. And of course we go with The Manhattan Project, which was published by Konami. This is probably the best Turtles game on the NES. You can play 2 players at once, so just like Contra, it has a great multiplayer value as well. It looks like Konami were pretty much the kings of multiplayer experiences. Contra, Blades of Steel, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3. There are just so many awesome multiplayer Konami games, and Turtles 3 is just excellent. It definitely feels more like the arcade games. The graphics are really, really good for this for the original Nintendo, and it's just a super fun game. Everyone grew up watching the Ninja Turtles and loving the Ninja Turtles, and yes, Turtles 4, Turtles in Time, arguably is the best Turtles game of all time. But if I had to pick a second one, I honestly would go with the Manhattan Project. A super fun game. It's a little bit on the more expensive side for NES games. It is the most expensive in the trilogy, but it's also the best in the trilogy, and a game that you just must absolutely play, in my opinion. And the final Konami game. Of course we know what this is going to be. If you've ever paid attention to my channel, you know what series I love from Konami. You know what series Konami has destroyed. You know what series Konami has just forgotten about, and just we have to now do spiritual successors for it because we can't have anything nice in life. We have all these 3D games and these terrible side stories and fighting games and all sorts of weird stuff. Castlevania, okay? We have really 2 picks to choose from here. Castlevania 2, once again, an okay game, but definitely not up to the pedigree of Castlevania 1 or Castlevania 3. And this was actually a lot harder than the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles pick because I love Castlevania 1. I think that's just a perfect blend of gaming. It's just so much fun. It's so deliciously evil. The music is just timeless. There's so many cool things going on in that game, and that's a game that I've actually managed to beat. I've never beat Castlevania 3 because I'm a scrub lord, but I still love Castlevania 3. So I sat here and I thought back and forth. I said Castlevania 1, Castlevania 3, Castlevania 1, Castlevania 3. And then I thought, you know what? I gotta go with Castlevania 3. I know. It's just a better game though, because it takes that Castlevania 1 formula, that gothic dark style, those interesting enemies, and just really expands upon it, and it makes the world feel much more alive. Castlevania 3 was the first time you could play as different characters within the game. There are 2 characters that you can access within the game, and they're both very unique. They are both really game-changing characters in how you play the game and how you advance through the game, which was really unique for the NES. I don't think anyone picked up this game expecting to be able to switch characters on the fly. And the fact that they put that in this version of the game, they really ramped up the production values as well. The graphics just look so good. There's so many cool little effects that you think, you know, the NES shouldn't be doing this, but it's doing it. This is really one of the pinnacles of the NES library. One of the finest games in the NES library in terms of audio, in terms of visuals, in terms of pretty much everything. There's a reason why a lot of clone consoles can't play this game properly, because it's just that damn good. No, I'm just kidding. It has something to do with the programming in it, but it's just an amazing game. It's my favorite Konami game on the NES, and arguably one of my favorite NES games of all time. Castlevania 1, excellent, but Castlevania 3 just manages to squeak out as my favorite Konami game on the NES. Alright, so those are my 5 best Konami games on the NES. Now, like I said, Konami released a lot of games on the NES, whether it was under the Ultra brand or the Konami brand. In the comments section down below, I want you guys to tell me what Konami games you really enjoyed, because honestly, I probably will follow this up with an Ultra, follow-up video as well, because Ultra games actually had a lot of really good games too, like Nightshade, which is one of my favorite NES games. If you've never played Nightshade, go check out my review of it on the channel. Such an amazing game. But yes, Konami Ultra, just masters on the NES. So many awesome games, a few stinkers in there as well, but a majority of the games were just so awesome. So I would like to thank Alan over on the Patreon page for coming up with this idea. And if you guys enjoy this series where I talk about companies' best games on a platform, let me know in the comments section down below. There's a lot of companies and a lot of platforms, and coming up, since I'm going full time, I'll have a lot of time to do these. And I enjoy making these videos because it gives you guys sort of a thought, an inside look at my thought process when it comes to games, what I like in games, and what sort of games I like. So thank you for checking out this video. If you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, share this video around. If you really like my face, check out the social media links in the description box down below. We got a Facebook, Twitter, Patreon, t-shirts, website, all sorts of fun stuff. I love you guys. I will see you on the next video. Later.
RGT 85, RGT 85. RGT 85.